Do you hear me, guys? Okay, cool. So this is the first step. So I'm so happy to see so many of you here today. I'm really glad that you come and you decided to spend this part of the day with me. I hope this presentation will help you better understand what is the meaningful difference between the narrative designer and the writer, and actually will help you better communicate with the departments between the narrative design department and the other design departments. I will also shed some light on the differentiation in case of preparing for starting the career as a writer and as a narrative designer. I will also put some examples of what to avoid being a narrative designer and a writer. And I will just make a holistic approach. What is the narrative design and why is it a meaningful feature in case of game design? But before that, I need to introduce myself because you already heard a lot, but you don't know me. So my name is Maria Borys-Piątkowska. I'm from Poland. I'm currently working at Flying Wild Hog studio. Before I was working at CI Games when I started my video game career. I'm also a proud member of the Women in Games Society, which is prolific and fruitful, and I encourage every one of you ladies to follow them up and guys to support them. Actually, apart from my video game career, I am also very into the role-play games, pen and paper. I was a translator and author of the Call of Cthulhu 7th edition at the Polish market. And yeah, this is a kind of my childhood that actually accidentally appeared to be also my job. Yeah. In case of my professional career, I was working on several titles. Probably the most known are Evil West, already released, Shadow Warrior 3, Sniper Ghost Warrior Contracts, Slavic Punk, and Lords of the Fallen iOS. I was responsible for creating characters, plot, the whole, story. I was responsible for coordinating the voice lines recordings, and just taking care of the narrative part of the game design. So, as I said, I am a writer and a narrative designer, which actually in practice can look like this as a writer and a narrative designer as this. And this is actually the very meaningful thing, because I want to, in my thesis, I want to explain that these are two separate specializations, responsibilities. Of course, it can be done by only the same person, and it's actually, in my opinion, good when you have one person that makes also the writing thing and the narrative design thing. But it depends on the phase of the game production that actually you use your narrative design skills and writing skills. I will delve into more into details in a second. So just to be on the same page, we are going to start with some kind of a high concept, let's say, fantasy and holistic approach. Then we are going to delve into some boring academic stuff, and I will try to explain the difference between the terms in terminology and make it clearer for the sake of the game design and the language of video games. Then I will explain what's a writer, what's a narrative designer, and just how they match and what is the difference. And they will come up with a conclusion that might be surprising for you, but it's important, I think. I will leave it to the end, not to spoil everything. And as I said at the beginning, I will just get briefly through the common rookie mistakes, as I said, but these are just part of our experience, and I would not call it seriously a mistake. It's just a part of a experience, right? So everyone is learning through the whole career. So I would call what we are doing as the designers, we are actually selling the dreams of the players. We are promising some kind of fantasy, some kind of idea to the players, and we are planning to make it as best as possible. So as the devs, we are the architects of their dreams. As the narrative designers, we are people who are conceptualizing those ideas, those fantasies, and we are making them happen. We are making them actually work. So if if a player wants to be or dreams of being a Spider-Man or a vampire hunter, we as the designers, we are taking care of every element building around this fantasy to make the player exactly feel like a vampire hunter as much as we can. And writers are the people who are actually fulfilling those elements as part of the design, who weave those dreams into words, and they are part of the element that is also needed to fulfill this fantasy. So they are, proudly speaking, they are a part of the design team, which is not that popular opinion. To make it to move forward and to be prepared to state this difference between narrative designers and writers, I just want to separate and distinct some kind of terms that appear during the game design, during the narrative design, during the meetings, and so on, and just to facilitate this communication between the departments and to make you better understand the language of narrative designers and writers, I just need to, I would like to focus on a couple of terms that, of course, they have a lot of, let's say, explanations, definitions, according to different sources, because literature-wise, we can say that story is a set of events set chronological. It's a change from a character state A to state B. It's a action, it's a sequence, a beat that happens and involves a character doing something or changing something. So for example, like the king died, right? So we have the king and then the king died. The plot, it's the cause and effect. So it actually delivers this context and connection between those states A and states B. So if you want to put an example, I will use the Forster's example that the king died and then the queen died because of grief. Of course, we can assume that there is some like sudden or immediate correlation between those two things. But just to give you a quick example, it's like we have a cause and effect, right? So these are two separate terms. And of course, when we think of story, we already, like people, humans, we already think of stories that are not just, an abstract sequence of actions. We still we bear in mind that something happened because something, right? So we immediately think of story as with plot inside. Then we have, of course, this narrative design. And what does it mean? According to sources, again, the classical one, we have this narrative as an exposition of events that have occurred or are supposed to have occurred. So exposition, we can assume that this is also not only who, not only what, not only where and when, it's also, of course, why, so the plot. But also we need to think of the fact that we know how. We want to know how something happened, right? So to deliver the story, to deliver the plot, we need the narrative design, which is a set of all items that actually state the rules and guidelines of how to present this story that we made and this plot that we actually made. So the difference is, of course, story, the chronological sequence, the plot, which is cause and effect, and narrative design, which is actually the delivering the elements that create those parts of the story and the plot. So to make it simple and just to skip the academic thing, we can say that story is who and what, when and where, plot is the why, and narrative design is the how. And since actually this is like this distinction, we can say that there's also this discourse. We can say that story is already the plot. There are arguments that the people, the eggheads and other smarter people than me are arguing what is what, just to distinguish and just to have some kind of clear, let's say, element term that functions and can be matched together when it comes to analysis of this in-depth knowledge of story making, of storytelling. For the sake of this presentation and for the sake of the process of making a game, of making a story in a game, we can assume that we have this narrative as a comprehensive feature in a game design. So we have the story, we have the plot inside, because just to give you an example, when I say I broke my leg, the immediate question you will ask me is just, why? What happened, right? So what happened? You already know, I broke my leg. But you have this sudden and immediate fact in mind that you want to know why and how. And I can say why, because I was late for the bus and I didn't want to be fired from my company, right? From work. And how? Because the road was slippery. So immediately we match and we relate things together and we put it together and we have the story as a with a plot inside, right? Apart from the distinguishing thing connected with academics and so on. Then we have this process of narrative design. So the setting the elements that will tell me the story in one or other method or way, right? And then with this whole narrative, we have this comprehensive feature which leads us to the most important thing in the game, which is player's experience, of course. And that's why I just wanted to make it simple, make it clear for you to understand. And actually, we have it. That's cool. So having stated that, those distinctions and this narrative, let's say comprehensive feature, I can move on to tell you about this separate specializations, which is the writer and the narrative designer. I think that would be also helpful, not only when you communicate with the narrative department and just simply want to know what do you do during your work time, right? And also it will help you understand what they need from you as other design departments to make the player experience as best as can and to make the project the best as we can deliver, right? To fulfill those dreams and fantasies, as I said in the beginning. So I will use the one and only Molly Maloney, whom I thank. She's a pro, and I really recommend her to watch her GDC talks and other lectures that she actually did. I stole it from her. I thank you her, but it's for the sake of the knowledge and sharing experience. I adapted it a bit. If you watch it, you will know where I put some changes. But I really like this actually distinction. Writer is responsible for a character in the story, and narrative designer is responsible for a player in that story, which coherently makes the narrative. And this is what the narrative department should come up with in the end. Actually, I think it might be helpful if you are being recruited or you are recruiting. So you know what to ask a candidate or a beginner in the industry about his scope of responsibilities, tasks, and about his knowledge, right? That he is aware what he would like to perform, what he would like to tackle, and what is actually his work and everyday tasks, and with which he actually feels the most comfortable, right? Because not every writer is a good or is a skillful or very fluent narrative designer. Not every narrative designer is a fluent writer who knows how to, weave the story into words in a perfect way. So, what's a writer? Just in brief, because of course, according to the companies and depending on the stage of game production, there will be a lot more tasks, smaller and bigger and so on. But just to make sure we know the main difference and we have established those most important and most popular aspects of being a writer. So, they write a story and a plot, right? So this is no doubt that this is happening. They write the dialogues and all in-game text. Of course, depending on the company, and sometimes the level designers or game designers can take the localization doc, which I will tell you about later, and put their sentences or objectives or other hints for the player because it results from the mechanics they are working on. And that's super cool. That's fine, because a writer also should learn what the mechanic how the mechanic works and what actually does it do, right? So still, this communication and this cooperation is important, But I recommend and I encourage every studio to let your writers correct those sentences and those in-game texts, because they know how to do it and they know how to make it fluent. The most important thing also, which is not very popular, as I know from my experience, is that writers supervise the recording sessions of the voice lines, if any, because not every game needs or has budget to also implement the voice lines to the characters, right? So I was also, I know the situation, I witnessed it, that the writer wasn't invited to the recording session, and there was only the production. It's a river topics, I will not delve into details, but what I want to tell you is that if you as producers or designers responsible for casting and making those sessions happen, you are like choosing people who are on site or just, you know, support the actors. Let there be at least one writer or and sound designer, of course, because writers are delivering the best people to deliver the context. Because actors, when we work in the booth and the recording session is on, it's very often that actors do not obtain the cutscenes to, you know, have an example of what is going on in the scene. It's usually happening. Also, it's actually the actor works only with the file. There are no supporting, you know, scenes or movie samples of the game usually, right? So it's difficult for an actor who doesn't know the context and doesn't see the big picture. He may guess what is going on, and it's like very, you know, very difficult, and it's clear that there could be some mistakes. So it's very important to have a writer on board who will explain the context, who will say what is actually happening, and how should the actor, the talent, just deliver his voice, and what is actually the main clue of this scene. I know, like working as an actor, I used to work as a voice actor also. I just got the file, I just got the separate lines, and I was just reading it, and those lines were in mess because it was not chronological even. So I was like guessing, okay, what is the context here, and what is the context here? So bye can be different, right? So this is very important, and I encourage you to let the writer be there. How actually, what does it mean in practice to be a good writer? Let's see the, yeah.
I'm not confirming
If you
anything.
hear, that's fine. Take a look at the policeman and Hank, which is the older detective.
Androids are not permitted beyond this point.
It's with me.
I know this game, Detroit Become Human, it's not a perfect game, but in case of storytelling, in terms of delivering the story, the dialogue writing, it has some pearls, and one may find there really good moments. Actually here, when we have this world of full of androids that have problems, and they can be dangerous to people, and we have Hank, who is actually forced to work with one of the androids, and he's hostile towards Connor, who is an android. He says there, like, it's with me, right? This one word, it like explains everything. His attitude, his actually approach toward his work and cooperation with Connor, the lore-wise thing, and the character, the features of Hank himself, right? So a line doesn't need to be very long and explain everything. It just has to be straight to the point, right? So this is one of the best lines in Detroit, in my opinion. Of course, I can argue, but this is actually, I think, good example. So moving on, what is, as compared to the writer, what is a narrative designer? Yeah. Remember, these are separate specializations. They are treated synonymously very often, and you will probably hear a lot of times that a writer is a narrative designer and narrative designer is a writer. Sometimes there will also appear the story designer term. I hope it will help you understand the difference. Of course, it's a way of communication, how at the end, eventually, you actually understand each other and you obtain what you want as a team, right? But it's good to know the difference just to make sure we can avoid mistakes. So in case of a narrative designer and his or her scope of responsibilities, actually there can be similar or the same as in case of the writer, right? So we have also participation in creation of the story and plot, character arcs, and sometimes even dialogue lines, because narrative designer as the writer will be probably the one and only person or two persons if these are two people that are full control of the story in a game, and they are aware of everything that is happening within the story of the game, because it's not that I am just underrating other departments. It's that it's because of people are busy at work when delivering the project. So level designers sometimes are just stuck with their only their like levels, which can be first level, second, 15th and 21st, and he only knows or she only knows what is happening on those separate particular levels, because he or she doesn't have time to catch up with everything, especially if the game is very, very long, right? So narrative designers are those bridges between the narrative department and other design departments. They will know why on this particular level is happening this and this, why the character is in this place, and why he is or she is like ending this level with this and this emotion, right? Or this and this objective. So it's very important to communicate with your narrative designers, and that's why I encourage every company to have a narrative designer in their team, and just to make sure we are all on the same page. Narrative designer, just to give you a short example, when it comes to cooperation with the writer and this making this narrative together, we have writer who writes lines, and narrative designer takes these lines and he actually distributes it on the level. So when the player is navigating through the space, through the level, through the places in the mission, narrative designer, when he takes, for example, or she takes, for example, a line that is important in case of story, so it delivers some lore-wise or story-wise information, he will make sure and he will take care that the in this place it will be safe, because the player enters this trigger box and he will hear or she will hear the information that is needed, right? It is narrative designer who cooperates with, for example, level designer or game designer, and they will together distribute the barks, which are the short utterances that are popular during, for example, or are distributed during combat, right? So we are sure that the player will hear some barks that will hint him, for example, about the weaknesses, weak spots of the enemy, or other things. And narrative designer is the one who actually knows that, okay, so this is an arena, and along with the level designer, he will take care of distribution of those barks, right? So that they will not cross in and interrupt the other one-liners that are story-wise, for example, right? So this is a narrative design also. Narrative designer also will use this story as a tool, so that he will let the player or she will let the player experience the story through the levels. When, for example, we have this, let's say, level art, we have a level about hunting a vampire, right? And the narrative designer is the one who will explain, okay, so this is the level where we are hunting this main boss. So we are entering main boss vampire. So we are entering the whole castle, and it's good to have some assets that are blood or for example newspapers that the player will find, and there will be some headline that people are gone missing and they are found bloodless, right? This is a kind of environmental storytelling, of course another topic for different lecture, but this is a part of the narrative designer's responsibility to communicate with level artists, to take care that the level artists will know that those assets of blood will be there and where they will be distributed as well, right? So again, this bridge, this supporter when it comes to building those elements of the narrative design of the elements that will help tell the story to the player. And actually I have also a short film that I really like, and this is actually a very brief representation of what is the scope of responsibility of a narrative designer. actually, and is my favorite. Yeah, so actually, this is one of my favorites. As I said, short movies about how to explain the narrative designer's work. Right. So to match it all together, we can say that the narrative designer is a fully fledged designer, same as, of course, as a writer. But also, it's very popular opinion that we have a writer, and writer can work remotely, and it doesn't. It's not necessary that he or she will be on site and just taking part in designing the whole other narrative as it come up to be elements of the story, right? So he just writes or she just writes and that's all. No, it's not that. And narrative designer is like a continuation of what actually the writer does. We can assume that. So we have it triangle of knowledge, as I call it. So the narrative, the whole part, so the work both of the designer, narrative designer, and writer, we have to make sure we have to take care of the story in a game that is coherent and playable. And this is the whole clue of the narrative. This is what's glue the work of the narrative department. So to again to like explain in detail what I had in mind at the previous slide, we have it like that. Gameplay is what is the player doing. Narrative, why is the player doing that. Narrative designer, understanding players' actions, and writer, understanding characters' actions. And we can just match it together. We can see it that, and bearing that in mind, we can come up with thinking of a story creation process, of a narrative process, of engaging the other departments, designers, to be on board on the same page with the story designers, so that everyone knows why is something happening and how to help the player experience the story within the best way, right? If we have, for example, if we have this Red Riding Hood, so we have the story, right? So we have the girl that is going through the forest. She delivers some goods to her granny. We have the wolf, who is an antagonist. The wolf dresses up as a granny, and something happens, right? We have the plot. So we have the why the girl is going there alone, why the wolf is dressing up as a granny, which is the clue, actually, question. We know that he wants to eat Red Riding Hood. So we have those motivations and goals, right? So we have the cause and effect, we have the why. And in case of how, so the narrative design, we have it that the Red Riding Hood is dressed in red coat and red hood, which is representing the fact that according to the folklore, the red color is something that actually protects the people from the pure evil, right? So that's why it's red. So we can tell it in this way that she is some kind of protected, and she actually obeys the rules of the folklore and so on. When she actually enters the forest, we need to take care of another narrative design element, which is, for example, making the forest gloomy and dark, looking gloomy and dark. Possibly, if we were to make a game out of Red Riding Hood, the level through the forest would be like supported by music and sound effects. So the whole, for example, barks and taunts from the wild animals, which is the sound design, would be supporting this kind of narrative, this kind of fantasy that we are creating and building this atmosphere of dark, gloomy, and hostile forest, right? So the sound design is, of course, a part of narrative design as well. So when it comes to creating the game content, we established this kind of correlation between those elements. And now I will come up with my conclusion that might be surprising for you, but very important, and I hope it will be logical after you heard all of I said. Let's imagine that we have, of course, some games that do not have plot. They can have like the fantasy, the promise dream, the promise fantasy that we want to sell to the player, right? So imagine we are the, for example, Baron Railroad Tycoon, right, in the 19th century. So it may not have a plot or anything, but it will definitely have some kind of narrative design just to support the fantasy, right? So if we are for example, 19th century railroad tycoon, everything from UI through the assets, art, sound, and so on, it will be fitting the fantasy of the 19th century, right? And this is narrative design. So my conclusion is, in big picture, that every designer at some point in his or her field of expertise is a narrative designer in some way. And because narrative is not only a plot, as we know, I say that we all lived together, right? In order to support this fantasy of being the dream seller to the player. So we need to make sure that the audio visuals also fit, right? When we have, for example, Shadow Warrior 3. Yeah, this is like a game I was making, so I can tell it more. We have this Lo Wang. Lo Wang is a nerdy samurai. So in a comic stylized version of Japan. So we have the samurai. Okay, we have some story about the samurai. We have some plot about the samurai. But to make this fantasy happen, we need for example, that's not mine yet. We need, for example, the concept artist and 3D artist that make this katana, which is an inevitable element of a samurai, right? If I ask you as a player, as an audience, how would you like to samurai look like? You probably will say that katana is a part of him, right? So we need to make sure that this element of narrative design is there. We need to make sure that if we have this katana placed well and created well by the not narrative art designers, we need to make sure that the game designer took care of the mechanics, that it will look natural when your player character, when Lo Wang is, fencing with katana. We need to make sure, having an animator on board, that this katana, those movements will be natural, will be distinct, will have several opportunities to use this katana in different ways, right? So we have another match of different design departments to fulfill this fantasy and to create these elements of narrative design, right? So again, the same is with sound designers, that I really encourage to remember about them, because they are also sometimes kept in the shadows, but they shouldn't be, because they are responsible for the audio behind all the scenes, all the levels, and so on. Just bear in mind, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, when a player navigates through the space, navigates through the level, it's like for example, quiet, peaceful place where he finds some collectibles, doing some stuff, anything, and when he enters the arena of combat, the sound, the music, changes, right? It's more aggressive, it's faster, probably, it will be louder. So this is also an element of the narrative design that is important. I cannot imagine a game or a movie without soundtrack, right? So this is an important part of the narrative design as well. So this is my conclusion, that we are all narrative designers. And as I promised, because it's sometimes like people ask me after my lectures about those basic things, that what should I avoid when I am applying for a writer's job or narrative designer's job, right? Or what is the common mistakes that I am skipped in recruitment and I am not hired? So I just to make a step ahead and possibly answer your future question. According to my experience, and I was in the same place, believe me. Now it's different, and I can share my knowledge, and just to make sure that if you're applying for a job, you know what to do, you know what you want to do, and you probably will know what to skip, avoid, and be smart at the very beginning. So, in case of writers, I know we as the writers have a very confusing relationship with the delete button. But this is the best thing that you can use. My boss, he used to tell me that the most overused button on the keyboard is the button delete if you are a writer. And this is good because if you write too much details, for example, about backstory of the characters, and you want to present it to other design departments, as I said, level designers, game designers, they are busy. They are doing their stuff. It's like a hell of a ride with delivering some kind of mechanics in short time. So they will not have time to read all the documents that you came up with backstory about, grandparents and puppies that actually your character like or used to have a relationship with, right? If it's not important for the game, then you probably can skip this. It can be probably important for you when you write your character, but if you are preparing documents for other departments and you will be asked for that, it's good to have it short. It's good to know how to write the so-called one-pagers. Of course, one-pagers are sometimes 2 pages long, right? But still, it's a very short and very concrete version of your thought. It's good to know how to distribute your thoughts in a the clearest way as you can, so that if the audience, if the other departments, are reading it, they will know already what is actually needed from them, right? The most important thing is for the writer is to learn how to kill your puppies, which is get rid of the ideas that are actually not necessary or simply they don't work. In case of narrative designers, they are sometimes very, far-fetched in their ideas. So as they think of themselves as just a support, they want to, shoot with ideas and sometimes do not obey the rules of the budget, of the production, and of the technical thing around, right? So they simply can, think of or just design and write on one-pagers or not about the mechanics that are actually not possible to happen within this kind of game, right? And the most important thing also, in case of those two departments, those two responsibilities, is that they also forget sometimes that what is not in the game, it's not in the game. And this is very, very important, because as a writer, it's not like you write down your lines and you just send it to the designers and that's okay, I'm fine, yeah, I can relax now. No, you have to play your game. You have to check if your lines are in the hands of a person who will implement them. Possibly it's a narrative designer and possibly it's you, so you have to take care, when to put those lines and where to put those lines, so that the player will hear everything that you think it's needed to be heard in case of story, right? Because if a character enters some level and there are no one-liners, for example, that are supposed to support the story-wise elements, the player will know nothing about it. And it's like it doesn't matter that you as a writer knows it and it's logical and it's clear for you. The player has to get a clear delivery of the story elements, right? So, and you are responsible as a writer for it to make it happen, to distribute it to the narrative designer or other designer who will help you implement it in the game. You are also responsible for working with cinematic designers, for example, and take care of where this cutscene, the hell is happening and where is it like the beginning of it, right? So remember that you are fully fledged designers, either as a writer and as a narrative designers, and we all live together. We all are a part of the narrative design, and we all have to remember that this is for the sake of the game and for the most important thing, which is the player's experience and player's agency. And that's it. Actually, this is the bibliography I used because I love bibliographies, and I spread the good word and I share it every time I can. It's actually a drop in the ocean because there are lots more of those books and guidelines, but these are like a couple of which I really like and I find it very useful. If you want to contact me, I can be a bit old school because you can follow me on Facebook. I'm also at LinkedIn. If you actually put my name on it, you will find me on LinkedIn. You will find me on Discord, and you can email me anytime. I am there because I'm writing and I'm doing the narrative thing, and I'm already actually constantly at work. So yeah, thank you very much. That's fine. Cool. Yeah, it's the first time I am on time. Cool. Thank you. Yeah.